It is Christmas time. We had a good time last Sunday decorating the church, and there are all kinds of things that are already happening. It seems like we've had a long Christmas season because we did the whole shoebox thing, and that has to come early. Before that, we did the Christmas angel tree. That was it. I get all these projects mixed up. We did Angel Tree. That's a project providing gifts for the children of inmates. I think I was working on that one in August. So it seems like we've had a nice long run up to Christmas here, and it's nice to have it finally arrive. And we're going to be talking about the power of hope this particular Christmas. This Advent season, we're going to be looking at that theme of God's promise of better days for our lives. When I first started thinking about this series and that idea of better days, I'm thinking, are we really talking about better days? But this is actually what God has promised to us, and he uses this phrase here in Jeremiah. God's promise of better days eventually find their fulfillment in the coming of Jesus Christ. Back in Jeremiah, it was about the coming of better days in his world. They were being invaded by the Babylonians, by Nebuchadnezzar. They'd surrounded the city. And yet God comes down to Jeremiah in the midst of this horrible disaster, this horrible national crisis that they were facing, and said, better days are coming. And if Jeremiah can do that, we can do it as well. These coming days are supposed to be filled with hope. Every day we use that word hope. I hope that I get better. I hope I get an A on a test. I hope that I have a great marriage. I hope I get a raise. We use that word hope all the time. Hope is a vision for better days that changes our present. It's not just a vision that we put out there into the future. It is something that should change what happens in our life at this present time. If you say, I want to get an A, I hope I get an A on this test. Well, that should change what you do. That means you should study. That means you should prepare. That means you should find out what the teacher wants. That means that you should do all this. If you want a raise, if you hope for a raise, you should start working harder. You should come in earlier, go home later. That's not always a good thing. But there are choices that we make, changes that we make, because we hope in better days. And this is what God is asking Jeremiah to do in this chapter. Hope dictates the choices that we make. If we hope for something, we need to start living our lives in accordance with that hope. To help us in our journey, I want to introduce you to the prophet of hope, Jeremiah. He doesn't sound like the prophet of hope, though. I don't know if you've ever read Jeremiah's material. But Jeremiah is the prophet of hope because there was nothing to live for in his world. The whole world was coming apart. His religion would soon be destroyed. His country would be destroyed. His city would be destroyed. His family would be destroyed. But he has hope in this. And he knows that God can do good things in him. At a very young age, Jeremiah was told that he had been selected as a leader. He was probably a junior in high school in 627 when God came down and said, Jeremiah, I got good plans for you. Before you were even born, I was forming you in your mother's womb to become this gigantic spiritual leader that would help during this horrible time in the life of these people. And Jeremiah became that man of God. In this national crisis, Jeremiah goes to King Zedekiah, and he says, listen, Zedekiah, you can have hope, but you're going to need to surrender to God, and you're going to need to trust in God. Zedekiah didn't want to do that. He was still trusting in his armies. Even though Nebuchadnezzar had him outmanned and outgunned and out everything else, Zedekiah still believed that they could win. But Jeremiah came along, and against all national policy, against every advisor that Zedekiah had, he said, listen, your only chance here is to surrender. Well, Zedekiah is going, I've seen what they've done to kings. What are they going to do to me? And instead, Zedekiah put his capital city through one of the most horrible times in the existence of humanity. I don't know if you've read the stories from back then, but they were starving, they were dying, disease was everywhere. There was no hope in the world. Jeremiah says, your only hope is to do what God says, surrender, and I will bring you through this time. Zedekiah didn't want to do it because there were other prophets. There were other prophets who were saying, oh no, you're a great guy, Zedekiah. You can handle this, king. God has never let his city be destroyed. God lives here. God loves us. The problem is these other prophets didn't realize that, and didn't want to realize, that they had betrayed God, that they had turned their back on God, and now God, after 600 years, was saying, I'm going to turn my back on you as well. I am going to allow this city to be destroyed so you would learn a lesson never to betray me again in this life. But they were offering this king all kinds of hope, saying, no, 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 there's going to be peace. There's going to be peace. There always has been peace. We just have to wait this out. Nebuchadnezzar will go away. Well, Jeremiah didn't buy that. Instead, he went up to Zedekiah and says, no, you're all going to die now if you don't listen to me. And so they threw Jeremiah in prison because he was telling the king contrarian advice. He was telling them that they couldn't win. They threw him in prison. But while he was in prison, he writes down these amazing words that we read here in Jeremiah chapter 30 about God's great hope for us in this world. Now notice, according to this, that according to Jeremiah chapter 30, hope is a vision for better days. The days are coming, declares the Lord. There are better days on the way. It's all about in the future. It's all about the hope that we can have. It's all about changing our perspective and looking to Jesus Christ to change our vision of what's going to happen. So the days are coming. Better days are on the way. Hope is about this promise that God has given through Jeremiah to the people of Israel and to us as well. For the follower of Jesus, we know that better days are on the way. Hope is always dependent upon, though, on the one who makes the promise. In the same way it happened in the Old Testament. Hope depends on the person making the promise. Hope is based on a God who is really there. A God who has left good and sufficient reasons for us to have a solid hope in what he is going to do. Our hope isn't built on wish fulfillment. It isn't built on wishful thinking. We can know that we can trust in God. The view of hope counters this misconception that we have in this world, and a lot of Christians have in this world, that, oh, well, Christianity is based on feelings and on how we feel at the time and our emotions, and science is based on fact and reason and rationality. This is simply not the case. It is simply not the case. Sam Harris, who is a contemporary writer, has written a number of good books, complains about how Christians don't feel like they need to have reasons for what they believe. He got a letter from a young lady who said, I don't understand why you're always talking about reasons why we know that these things are true. I feel like I am a Christian. I feel that God is there. I know he's there because I feel it. And she was actually saying, I don't want any of these reasons. I just want to feel that God is there. Well, he goes on to say that listen, you know, if somebody came up to you and said, hey, yogurt makes you invisible. You know, any self-respecting Christian in this world will say, no, show me the proof. Let me eat some. Let me see if I turn invisible. But when it comes to their belief, when it comes to their faith in Jesus Christ, well, then we don't need any reasons at all, and sometimes we're just plain gullible. Well, God has left us good and sufficient reasons. A Christian's hope is based on a particular history with God, a history that we have seen him act, a history that we have seen him act in the Bible, a history that we have seen him act in our world and in our lives, and because we have seen him act and because we've read about his activities in the Bible, we can trust in God and place our hope in him. We know what God has done in the past. You know, if you read the Bible, you read how during Isaiah's time, God said, I'm going to free you from these kings that are attacking you within a few days. Came true. We know that he prophesied that